Gefreiter Otto Brandt wrote to his family, "In Russia you could hear silence between battles. Here the Americans shoot constantly. You cannot sleep. You cannot eat in peace. The machine guns fire all day and night." By autumn 1944, German forces in the West understood they faced an enemy whose strength lay not in individual soldier quality or tactical sophistication, but in industrial capacity translated into overwhelming firepower. The M2 Browning symbolized this reality, a relatively simple weapon mass-produced in quantities German industry couldn't match, supplied with ammunition measured in billions of rounds, and employed according to doctrine that valued material expenditure over conservation. The Eastern and Western fronts had taught German forces the same lesson through different methods. In the East, Soviet numerical superiority in men proved decisive. In the West, American numerical superiority in machines and ammunition proved equally decisive. And the war was about to enter its final phase. German cities themselves would soon experience what the .50 caliber meant when Americans came to destroy rather than liberate. Remagen, Germany, March 7, 1945. The Ludendorff Bridge, spanning the Rhine River. Lieutenant Karl Friesenhahn, German combat engineer, received orders to demolish the bridge as American forces approached. His demolition charges were prepared. The detonator was ready, but American tanks appeared on the western approach before he could act. Then the .50 calibers opened fire. Multiple M4 Sherman tanks positioned themselves 300 meters from the bridge, their commanders cupola-mounted M2s, suppressing the eastern bank. Sustained fire kept German engineers from reaching the demolition controls. Tracers ricocheted off steel girders. Rounds punched through the wooden bridge deck. The sound echoed across the river valley, that now familiar industrial roar of American firepower. American infantry rushed the bridge under covering fire. Friesenhahn managed to detonate charges, but only partially. The bridge sagged, but remained standing. Americans crossed. The last major natural barrier protecting Germany's heartland was breached. The Rhine crossing symbolized Germany's final months. Not dramatic last stands, but systematic elimination of resistance through overwhelming force. And everywhere, the .50 caliber. By early 1945, German forces defending their homeland faced material disparity beyond any previous campaign. American armies approaching from the west brought thousands of vehicles, each mounting at least one M2 Browning. Tank battalions, mechanized infantry, artillery tractors, supply trucks. Even ambulances carried .50 calibers for self-defense. Obergefreiter Josef Richter, 17 years old, conscripted into Volkssturm militia defending his hometown near Aachen, experienced his first combat in February 1945. He had received 3 days of training. His unit was issued captured French rifles and 10 rounds of ammunition per man. They were ordered to stop American armor. The Americans arrived with 6 Sherman tanks and 3 companies of infantry supported by fighter-bomber cover. Richter's position, a hastily dug foxhole behind a stone wall, came under .50 caliber fire within seconds of American contact. He never fired his rifle. He couldn't raise his head. The suppressive fire was so intense that German defensive fire was negligible. American infantry walked forward methodically while machine guns kept defenders pinned. Richter survived by surrendering. 70% of his company died or was wounded without inflicting a single American casualty. Urban combat in German cities revealed the .50 caliber's devastating effectiveness in built-up areas. When American forces fought through towns like Würzburg, Nuremberg, and Munich, M2s mounted on half-tracks suppressed buildings systematically. The heavy 12.7mm rounds punched through brick walls, shattered concrete, and turned wooden structures into kindling. Hauptmann Ernst Weber, defending Nuremberg with remnants of an SS Panzergrenadier division, witnessed American urban warfare tactics. They advance one building at a time. Machine guns fire continuously at every window, every door. We cannot return effective fire. Then their infantry enters with grenades and flame weapons. The Americans had perfected suppression doctrine. Before infantry exposed themselves, .50 caliber saturated potential threat areas. The expenditure was prodigal. hundreds of rounds to suppress a single building. But American logistics sustained it effortlessly. German defenders, by contrast, rationed their final ammunition desperately. Machine gun teams fired 5-round bursts instead of sustained fire. Rifles carried 20 rounds instead of full loads. Artillery pieces had shells counted individually. The material balance that had always favored Americans now became completely one-sided. General Major Friedrich von Mellenthin, Chief of Staff for 5th Panzer Army, observed the final collapse. Our tactical skill remained excellent. Our soldiers fought bravely, but we had no ammunition, no fuel, no air support, no reserves. The Americans advanced because we could not stop them, not because they outfought us tactically. The psychological impact on young German soldiers was profound. Teenagers conscripted in the war's final months faced an enemy whose firepower seemed limitless. The .50 caliber's sustained fire created hopelessness. No matter how bravely Germans fought, the Americans simply poured more fire onto positions until resistance collapsed. Gefreiter Hans Zimmermann, 16 years old, defending the Ruhr pocket in April 1945. We knew we would lose. Every soldier knew. But we fought because orders demanded it. The American machine guns never stopped. Not for minutes, not for hours. They fired all day. By April, organized German resistance west of the Elbe River had effectively ceased. American forces advanced against scattered opposition, isolated units, fanatics, old men and boys conscripted into hopeless defensive positions. The M2 Browning continued its work, suppressing each pocket of resistance until infantry could close and force surrender. May 8, 1945. Germany surrendered unconditionally. In cellars and bunkers across Germany, soldiers who had survived heard the news. For many, the overwhelming memory was sound. The sustained roar of .50 caliber fire that had dominated every engagement, every defensive position, every retreat. The M2 Browning had become the soundtrack of Germany's defeat. Not the crack of rifle fire or boom of artillery, but that industrial, relentless hammering that represented American firepower doctrine in its purest form. Unlimited ammunition, sustained suppression, material superiority, overwhelming tactical skill. Now, in defeat, German officers and soldiers had time to analyze what they had faced, and their assessment would reveal uncomfortable truths about modern warfare that contradicted everything German military tradition valued. Summer 1945, Germany in ruins. The war was over. General der Fallschirmtruppe, Alfred Schlemm, sat in Allied custody, writing his assessment of American combat effectiveness for military intelligence officers. He had commanded corps-level formations against Americans from Normandy through the Rhine crossings. His analysis was brutally honest. The Americans did not defeat us through tactical superiority, Schlemm wrote. They defeated us through material abundance. Their .50 caliber machine gun symbolized this perfectly. A simple weapon, produced in quantities we could not match, supplied with ammunition we could not imagine, employed according to doctrine that valued firepower over finesse. The statistical reality was staggering. American industry produced 1,900,000 M2 Browning machine guns during the war. German production of the MG-131 13mm heavy machine gun, the closest equivalent, totaled approximately 3,000 units. The ratio 630 American guns for every German equivalent. Ammunition production revealed an even starker disparity. American factories produced billions of .50 caliber rounds annually. German 13mm production, constrained by resource shortages and Allied bombing, declined throughout the war. By 1945, some Luftwaffe units couldn't obtain ammunition for their heavy machine guns at all. But numbers alone didn't explain German hatred of the M2. The weapon represented something deeper, a fundamental difference in how Americans approached warfare. Generalleutnant Fritz Bayerlein, who had fought Americans from North Africa through Germany, articulated this in post-war debriefings. German doctrine emphasized precision, economy, tactical elegance. We trained our soldiers to achieve maximum effect with minimum expenditure. The Americans inverted this completely. They achieved maximum effect through maximum expenditure. The M2 embodied John Moses Browning's design philosophy. Reliability through simplicity. The weapon used a short recoil operation with a rising bolt lock. It could be field stripped with basic tools. It functioned in every climate and condition. When it malfunctioned, rarely repairs were straightforward. German weapons often achieved superior performance through complexity. The MG-131 offered higher muzzle velocity and better armor penetration than the M2. But it was temperamental, required skilled maintenance, and was produced in numbers insufficient for widespread deployment. German engineering excellence created weapons too sophisticated for industrial-scale warfare. The Americans understood something German military tradition resisted. In modern war, an adequate weapon produced in overwhelming quantities defeats a superior weapon produced in limited numbers. The M2 was adequate, its quantity was overwhelming. Oberst Hans von Luck, analyzing his Normandy campaign experiences, identified 5 reasons German forces hated the .50 caliber. First, ubiquity. The weapon appeared everywhere. Every American vehicle, aircraft, vessel mounted at least one. We never escaped its presence. Second, sustained fire capability. They could fire continuously for minutes without pause. Our ammunition supplies never permitted such expenditure. Their suppression pinned us helplessly. Third, psychological impact. The sound was distinctive and terrifying. That industrial roar announced American presence and material superiority. It affected morale profoundly. Fourth, tactical limitation. The .50 caliber forced us into defensive posture constantly. We could not mass forces without immediate suppression. Our tactical options narrowed drastically. Fifth, industrial message. Every burst of fire reminded us that America's factories outproduced ours completely. The weapon symbolized why we were losing. Post-war German military analysis concluded that tactical excellence, while valuable, was insufficient when facing opponents with overwhelming material superiority. The Wehrmacht had been among history's most tactically proficient armies. It lost anyway. Major General Friedrich von Mellenthin, in his memoir Panzer Battles, wrote, "We learned that modern war is industrial war. The nation with greater production capacity, superior logistics, and willingness to expend material lavishly will prevail regardless of tactical skill." The M2 Browning's legacy validated this lesson. The weapon entered American service in 1933. 80 years later, in the 21st century, it remains in frontline service. No other military weapon has served so long with so few modifications. This longevity proves Browning's design genius. Simplicity and reliability trump sophistication when weapons must function across decades, in every environment, operated by soldiers with varying skill levels. The M2 works. It has always worked. It will likely work for decades more. German weapons from the same era, technically superior in many cases, are museum pieces. They were excellent weapons for the war they were designed to fight. But they weren't designed for the war that actually happened: industrial warfare requiring mass production, simplified logistics, and sustained operations across continents. Generalleutnant Bayerlein's final assessment was perhaps most honest. "We hated the .50 caliber not from emotion but from respect, born of experience. We feared its presence because we understood what it represented. We could not counter it because our industrial base could not compete. The weapon taught us that wars are won in factories as much as battlefields." The sound of the M2 Browning, that sustained industrial roar, became the sound of American victory. Not through tactical brilliance or individual heroism, though both existed, but through material abundance deployed according to doctrine that valued overwhelming force over elegant economy. German soldiers who survived learned this lesson through defeat. The .50 caliber machine gun fired first in combat in 1933. It fires still in the 21st century. Its longevity validates the philosophy that defeated Germany: simple, reliable, producible in quantity, sustainable through superior logistics. The Americans understood modern warfare before their enemies did. The M2 Browning proved it, one sustained burst at a time, across every battlefield of World War II. German fears were well-founded. German hatred was rational. German respect was earned. The weapon that won through industrial capacity rather than tactical sophistication continues winning 80 years later. That is the M2 Browning's ultimate legacy, and the final lesson German forces learned too late.